In this session, we're going to talk, it's called Slice and Dice Repurposing Video Content for Multiple Formats. That's a lot of words. What is this really about this session? And this is the description. Basically, a lot of times when you're coming to Final Cut Pro, you're getting media from a variety of sources, iPhones, which can shoot, horizontal, vertical. It might be square that you cropped it to. You might be getting square video from somebody. Maybe it's 720p or 1920 by 1080, or it's 4K, or it's a photograph that's 24 megapixels, and it's this hodgepodge of stuff. And you want to be able to deliver something that looks coherent and is sized properly. And that's what we're going to show you in this session. And so I'm going to try to give you some idea how to get the best results when mixing vertical and horizontal. And also, if you need to deliver both vertical and horizontal, how can you can leverage some of the power of Final Cut Pro to let it do some of that work for you automatically. We might look at matching some color, basically the quick fixes. It's not a color correction session, but sometimes you might want, a little bit of consistency. If you shot things at different times of the day, or there was different color or quality of light, we can talk about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different formats and maybe some suggestions, definitely some suggestions, about maybe you want to shoot something 4K or 6K, depending on your camera or phone. And then we're going to get into really the magical thing, which is Smart Conform. And hopefully a couple of you will say, I wish I knew that a week ago, because it is totally awesome. Now, why is this so confusing? Well, here's some examples. TikTok is vertical videos that are 9 by 16. That's the aspect ratio. That means it's 9 wide and 16 high. Not necessarily number of pixels, terms like 1080p or 4K or whatnot. It's just the shape of the image. YouTube likes things horizontal. So that's 16 by 9. That's basically like your TV. When you're watching something on TV, most of the LED TVs are 16 by 9. Sometimes you'll watch a movie on a TV and you'll see black bars in the top and bottom because the film was shot even wider screen and it has a slightly different aspect ratio. You'll hear things like 2 by 1 or 2.3 by 1. And that's an intent, but maybe you don't want that when you're actually putting something out to social media where people are watching it on their phones, and you want to use as much real estate as possible, as safely as possible, without actually truncating or cutting off the top and bottom or the sides of your image. Okay. And what about square? When should you use that? So we have 16 by 9, 9 by 16. Facebook likes 1 by 1 square. Sometimes square is the best answer. There's also vertical 4 by 5, which isn't quite 9 by 16. And so this is some of the things that we'll discuss. Now, I'm showing you some of these common aspect ratios on a phone. And, horizontal 16 by 9 should fill out the phone pretty much, because that's the aspect ratio of the phone. And also most computer screens are this like a TV set. But if you're doing it vertically and you put that same image inside a horizontal image in 16 by 9 space and they're holding the phone up, you're losing a lot of your image because it's really getting crunched. And it may not rotate depending on how it was built and how the person's using their phone. Square is going to give you a little bit more real estate, and that sometimes is the safest because it transfers well between phones and tablets and computers. And some areas, such as by default, Instagram was always square. Now they've changed it a little bit, but the question is, how do you want to deliver that? 4 by 5, as I indicated, is Facebook. And if you put a 16 by 9 in, you could, in some cases, lose the top and bottom of your image. And then, of course, 9 by 16, it seems a lot like 16 by 9, but that would leverage the entire space of the phone. So a lot of things to consider, and we're going to attack it a lot of different ways. We're going to look at this when you create a project to make sure it's the right aspect ratio. We're going to look at mixing a variety of footage and making sure you fill the proper space, and also a strategy using Smart Conform where you may build your program, your show, in a horizontal widescreen workspace, but then you want to reconform it to vertical or square. And Final Cut is brilliant at being able to use AI and get you about 90% there, sometimes 100% there. And we'll look at some of the gotchas that happen and how you can fix those challenges. So let's start off with creating a project. Now, I'm working under the assumption that you have a basic understanding of Final Cut or of video editing. Now, we have a lot of courses at the Video Creators University that go into more details. I just finished one with Nick Haraz where we actually covered some of the basics of Final Cut. Steve Martin's doing a bunch of classes. There's a lot to learn, and you can rewatch these things, as indicated at the beginning, all the way through until the conference ends. And if you have a VIP membership, you can watch and learn after that. So we're going to start with this, with the infamous, what I call the do not name your project untitled project. Always give it a name. But let's switch over to Final Cut and create a project. And I want to talk to you about two situations. One, creating a project that's the right size to start. And then we're going to talk about matching the project, which is your timeline. We use those terms interchangeably if you come from another video editor, but it's called your project, to your media. So I'm going to switch over to Final Cut. And I have a bunch of sequences already, but I'm going to make a brand new sequence. There we go. I found my mouse. You can do that with Command N, or just go to New and say New Project. And you will get this dialog box. And this gives you a couple of choices that you can make. The first thing you can do is you can set up the exact shape of, or the exact aspect ratio that you want for your program. So when you start bringing clips in, you can just scale them up, scale them down, reposition them, and deliver exactly what you see. So you have some options here. Most of the time, people just go with 1080 HD. This is the default, and this is just widescreen high definition, which means you're putting out a final product, which is usually 1920 by 1080 pixels, and you'll choose a frame rate. You can export this smaller or larger, but it still is going to have that same 16:9 aspect ratio. You can, of course, work with things, different sizes. I always recommend going with 1920 by 1080. If you want, you can even build something 4K. 4K is just 3840 by 2160. It's the same 16:9 aspect ratio. And when you share your video, when you export your video, you don't have to export it as 4K. You can export it as 1920. You can export it smaller. Now, this is just an aside, and I have a slide at the very end of this presentation so you can find out what the current state of upload requirements are for a variety of the social media platforms. But a lot of times you'll upload a higher resolution format. So even though people may be watching it at 1920 by 1080 or even smaller or lower resolution if they have a slow connection, the provider, whether it's Vimeo or YouTube or Instagram, will automatically scale things in the background so they have the best quality for that person's phone or tablet based upon their connection speed. You'd rather put something of higher quality than putting something of lower quality, and then it just is going to look bad no matter what. So generally, I like to export at the highest quality of what that social media platform will accept. And we'll talk a little bit about compression, but mostly we're going to talk about aspect ratio, frame sizes, and fixing problems. So I can do that. And if I make a sequence now, everything I drop into that sequence is then, in this case, 3840 by 2160. If I wanted to, I can also now create vertical and square sequences. The engineers at Final Cut added this a few iterations ago. And what's great about this, if I click on vertical, it gives me different options here. Instead of the old 1920 by 1080, we'll actually see 1080 by 1920. And I do recommend when you switch to either vertical or square, don't go for the default. Don't ignore this. You want to make this as big as possible based upon your media. So why cut something in a 720 by 720 space when you might as well do it 1080 by 1080? And if you want to do something even larger, I could go, instead of square or vertical, to custom, and in custom, I can go ahead and enter the exact aspect ratio I want based upon the number of pixels, and I'll have a slide that indicates what you may want to use. But in a nutshell, the odds are, if you're doing widescreen, it's just a multiple of 16 by 9, which is 920 by 1080. Vertical would be 1080 by 1920. Okay, square could be 1080 by 1080. It could be 2160 by 2160. Pretty much you can make it what you need to if you need to customize it. But out of the box, this is a good place to start. So if I decide that I'm putting things out to multiple platforms, I don't want to deal with putting out different aspect ratios, I may want to cut it in the most popular format, which is square. And as I said, don't name your project Untitled Project. We're going to just call this my 1080. I don't want to make that mistake. Sequence. I usually shoot things at 2997 or 30 frames a second. The nice thing about Final Cut, it will conform the frame rate to whatever your sequence is, but ideally you should choose a frame rate that matches all, if not most, of your clips. So when you look at your clips, and I'll show you how to find that in just a moment, you generally want to maintain that frame rate of the original clips. But Final Cut does a beautiful job of calculating the new frame rate without degrading your image. But we'll keep that at 2997. And as I said, we'll just call this square 1080, because that just is something I now know. And I'm going to hit OK. So now I have a brand new sequence, brand new project. If I select this project, here it is, square 1080, and I look over at the inspector, I can see that it's 1080 by 1080. And if I needed to change it, I can click modify. I get this dialog box, and maybe I wanted to say, oh yeah, all my footage is 24 frames a second, or I'm shooting 25 frames a second. So you're not locked in. But for now, we're going to hit cancel. Now let's bring some media in and see what happens when I do this. So I'm going to go over here. I have a plethora of media, and for those people that like cats, I grabbed a bunch of video of my cats in a bunch of different aspect ratios. That could be problematic because kittens are always fun. But we'll go back with some traditional footage. Go back here to all video. And let's say I have this interview here. As a matter of fact, if I open this up, I have everything organized, and I have some interview footage, interview clips. And if I look at this, you can see my interview clips are 3 different sizes. I have 1920 by 1080. I have ultra high def, and then I have some lower resolution stuff. So what happens when I bring these clips into my square sequence? And then I'm going to also show you what happens when I bring them into a regular sequence. So if I bring in the one that is pretty close to size, and this hasn't been color corrected, I'm going to hit the E key. That's the append editor. It throws it into the timeline. And if I look at this, it's letterboxed it. By default, when you bring a clip into a sequence, there's something to the right called spatial conform, okay? And it's going to default to fit, which means it will scale it up or scale it down so that the entire image is visible for the viewer at the end. Well, in this case, because I'm putting something in that is 16 by 9 in a square timeline, I end up with black bars on the top and bottom, which maybe you want or maybe you need, but in reality, I really want her to fill that space. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to click on fill. And what happens is Final Cut scales it up so there's no black bars. In this case, it's great because she is perfectly centered. But if I wanted to, I could click on here and turn on transform. We'll talk about transform throughout this session. But just to give you an idea, look at what it's done. It's centered it by default, because that's what it wants to do, and it just cut off the sides. If I'm in this mode, in the trim edit mode, okay, and I don't want to be in trim, I want to be in transform, in the transform, so I need to click that to transform, okay. There's a little button that some of you may not be aware of that's been there for a little bit. And what this allows me to do is actually show what's outside of my television frame, outside of my square frame, if I wanted to tweak it a little bit more for positioning. I can also scale things up if I wanted to zoom in. Okay, so that's one of the nice things you can do. Let's take a look at what happens if I drop a different size image, again, 16 by 9, into this square layout. I'm going to go here with something that's 1280 by 720. It's a lower resolution image. Final Cut's going to scale it up when I bring it in. I'm going to drag it in this time. Normally, I'd hit the E key, the append edit. But when I drop it in, you'll see, even though it was smaller, and this is a 1080 sequence, it scales it up because that's the default. It's trying to fit it. Whether it's larger or smaller, it's going to scale it up or scale it down just so the edges of the image hits one of, I should say, two of the sides, but it won't scale it up so much that all edges hit the sides and there will be no black bars. If I hit fill, if I hit fill, again, it's going to scale it up. It actually blew it up a little bit more than what I probably should do because it was only 720, but Final Cut's pretty good at scaling. And again, if I click here to get into the transform tool, I see what's outside and I can adjust it physically here for better framing. The other thing I can do is go over here to transform, which is in the inspector, and the same thing that I was doing, moving it left and right, I can do here. And this is a nice way to do it because if you noticed when I moved it, I actually moved it up and down a little bit, so there might be a blank space. I'm going to hit 0 because X is left and right, Y is up and down. And this way I can be very precise without having an accidental piece of black bar because I moved it a little bit. So that's a nice thing. It scaled it up and it's going to do an okay job of fitting into the 1080. And if somebody's watching it on their phone, they probably won't notice. Okay, if I switch to the last option here, which is none, look at what happens. It actually is right now scaled, and I want to make sure I didn't scale this up at all. Let's hit reset my parameter, to how that 1280 by 720 image fits into this 1080 by 1080 square. So in that case, it's not changing at all the pixel relationship. It's a pixel for pixel. And that is if you go to none. Let's take a look at that if I have an ultra high definition image, okay? So we have this image. Let me just mark it a little bit of an in and an out, I and O. I'm going to hit the E key to append it to my timeline. Click on it. And again, by default, it fitted in, even though this thing was way bigger than my square. It shrinks it down. If I hit fill, it does the same thing. You can move it left and right. It still is not blowing it up beyond its original resolution. But in this case, unlike the 720, when I hit none, this is the full 4K 1:1 pixel ratio. And I can say, you know something? I'm good with that. I'm going to go ahead and reframe her there. If I click on this button, this is what the viewer sees. And I click this little button here, which lets me switch between the viewer and full video image. It allows me to see what's outside the edge, which gives me a better sense of being able to position the video because I can see what's behind the curtain, let's say. And if you are ever animating something, which is changing its position over time, maybe a pan or a tilt with keyframing, it's great being able to see what's outside the frame instead of having to guess. So in all these cases, I was able to use a variety of clips. This one, remember, I want to go back and switch that to, not to none, but to fill. Move it over. And just, I moved it, and look, I probably did something bad here. Yep. 0, enter. Now it's perfect. Turn this off. From there, the clip selected. And then if I hit play.
And a model would invite some of her best students to meet her.
And let me just jump ahead there.
So I decided I remember TikTok.
So that's great. Even though I had different size images, I can put them all together. And that's one great way of working. Now, I've also built a project, in which case it was a standard 1920 by 1080. Okay. And here we have the same clips that I dropped in, and in which case it automatically scaled them up or scaled them down as needed. If I click on this one, this was the, I'm going to show you, right click, reveal in browser. That was 1920. it kept it the right size. This one was ultra high def, it scaled it down. And this last one was my 720. Shift F, by the way, is to reveal in browser. Okay, and this was 1280 by 720 and it scaled it up. So the nice thing is, if you have everything that's the same aspect ratio, when you drop it in, without even thinking, Final Cut will make it fit. The nice thing is knowing that you can control that. And when I indicated at the beginning of the session that there's some workflows that will make your life easier, one of them is I always shoot at a much higher resolution than I know I'm going to deliver. Even though my phone will shoot 1920 by 1080, I always leave it on 4K. It's going to use up a little more space, but it gives me the opportunity in my post to scale it and position it exactly how I want it, as opposed to limiting myself. Or if I wanted to zoom in, I'd lose resolution. So whether I'm shooting on a DSLR, on my drone, on my phone, any of my media, I try to shoot the highest resolution of pixels that is appropriate so that I can still do some manipulation in the edit without losing any of the clarity. So that's, use some space, but 4K is the way to go. If you do 6K, you can put out a 4K project and still zoom things. As a matter of fact, if you ever read like the IMDb about a film, a lot of times they'll shoot that film in 5K or 6K, and then they'll export it and deliver a 4K resolution, but it gives them the chance to do some reframing in post. Or in some cases, I'll shoot things that I know, I'll shoot static, but somebody's walking around, I can then track them and pan with them because I can blow it up twice as much, 200%, and not lose any resolution. So that's just an aside of how I like to work. Let's just jump back over to the keynote for a second. And there we go. So that is matching your, creating the project the right size to start. Now, the other thing is match the project to your media. So in this case, what I'm going to do is create a new project, Command N. And instead of writing all this in, I'm going to say use automatic settings. And I'm going to label this automatic. Not that I would normally do this, but it gives us an idea of what this sequence is. I'm going to say OK. And you'll notice here under video, it will set the video sequence aspect ratio and frame rate based upon the first clip that you drop into your sequence. I'm going to hit OK. So here we have my sequences. I'm going to go up here. It's under projects. There we go, automatic. I'm going to make a couple copies of these because we're going to do a couple different things. Let's just say duplicate and duplicate. And if I look at this now, even though it will adjust it, it does default to the last layout that I had, which happened to be square. Okay, but let's drop some video in and see what happens. So I'm going to go back to look at all my video. And we'll go back to something that's 16 by 9. Let's pick a nice, pretty shot. I think I have some nice slow-mo stuff here. Okay, so this clip is 1920 by 1080, even though my sequence I had created was 1080 by 1080. I drop that in. It's going to give me a notification that it doesn't match. But I'm going to say, OK. And let's see if I shot myself in the foot here. No, I think we're good. If I look at the sequence here, projects, automatic, where to go there? Look, it changed to 1920 by 1080. So if you're not sure, or if you don't want to go through all those steps and all of your footage is vertical or all of it is horizontal, and it's all the same aspect ratio, you can do automatic. And when you drop that first clip in, it will change the settings of your project to match that first clip. And here I did another one. Remember, I duplicated it. I'm going to drop in a clip that's 16 by 9. And this is a great opportunity for me to use those cat videos, because everybody likes a cat video. And let's see if I can find a vertical one. Here's a vertical one. Okay, cat's playing. It's vertical. It's 2160. So this is actually a 4K vertical. So when I drop this in, it's going to change this from that square to vertical. And the reason we're not seeing it all, and sometimes you'll see this in Final Cut, you'll see a little square with a little square inside of it. That means that my view scale is greater than the space I have on my interface on my screen. So I can either zoom back to something smaller or just kick over here to fit. Takes it down to 12%. And you'll notice this has now changed. If I look at automated 2 projects, automated 1, I'm sorry, it's now 2160 by 3840, which is vertical ultra high definition. And it actually probably matched the frame rate that I shot this at 60 frames a second. So I can easily make it based upon the clip. So I'm going to undo this or delete this and watch what happens. It's still the same now. If we look at this, it doesn't say what it is. You can see if I look over here, it says, oh, I don't know what my frame size is. Go back to the cats. And I have one here, hopefully, it's actually was trimmed to 4x5 already. Now you can make a custom that's 4x5. I can show you how to do that. But if you get footage that's 4x5, or maybe you just have one, and you can even do this in your phone. If you're on your phone and you hit edit and then you go to crop, you'll have aspect ratios that you can automatically apply, vertical or horizontal, and it'll be like 16:9, 4x5, 1x1 square. And you can crop that clip, and then when you export it and bring it into Final Cut, it's already a 4x5 aspect ratio. Look at this, it's 1080 by 1350. Okay, not 1080 by 1920. Okay, so this is that Facebook size. If I drop this in, okay, it's going to say, oh, I want to change it. I'm going to say, yep, okay. And what we should see here, if I go back up to my project, automatic 1, oh, it didn't do it. I messed it up because I didn't undo. It still tried to scale it in. Let me go ahead and try that again with automatic 2. It should let me do this. Automatic 2, cats, 4x5 cat attack. Let me open up automatic 2. Okay, go back to cats and cat attack, and hit. Okay, 1080 by 1920. Should have let me do that. I may have messed up. I thought this would work, but I will show you how to make it work. Okay, this clip is 1080 by 1350. So that's that 4x5 aspect ratio. I can do one of 2 things at this point, other than looking a little embarrassed. I could click on this, and under the inspector for my media, and make sure I select my sequence 2, that's the cat attack. And it created 1080 by 1920, but I don't want 1080 by 1920. I want that 1080 by 13, I already forgot, reveal in browser, 1350. Okay, so go here to 1080 by 1350. I go modify. Instead of here at that, I want to do something custom. I go to custom, 1080 by 1350, typing those in, hit OK. And now it has changed the sequence to be that right size, that correct size of the cat attack. You know, just had to play that because it was fun and I shot it with my iPhone. If I make a new sequence, I could have also done the same thing, use custom settings. And in this case, I would name the project the 4x5 maybe. I'd go down here, I'd bypass this and go to custom and type in those same numbers I did, 1350 by 1080. And then I can create a new one. I can even create this as a kind of a preset and then duplicate that every time I want it to be 4x5. And so that's a great way to be able to do that. So that's if it's an odd size. And the nice thing is, just by default, if you're not trying to do something that I was trying to do that's a little weird, and it could have been because of I trimmed it on my iPhone, is it will match whatever frame you have. So that's another way of looking at this. Coming back over to our keynote. Those are those 2 ways. I talked a little bit about spatial conform. So basically, fit, it's going to show the entire image. I'll show you this with a photograph also, because a lot of times you'll get a photograph and you're like, oh my God, what's happening? It's a 24 megapixel image. That's like the standard now. That's way larger than even ultra high definition, which is only 3840 by 2160. A lot of times that's 4000 by 6000. It's huge. So fit, fill, and none. And then we talked a little bit about the transform. That's really the key there. In addition to transform, you can also crop and trim. I'll show you that in a moment, but that's not the critical thing. We really generally want to fill the frame as a rule of thumb. Now, let's talk about good workflows and something called Smart Conform, which is I wish I knew that last week. So first, let me jump back to my projects. I believe I have one of photos with different aspect ratios. So this is a series of photos that I brought in. If I look at these photos, I'll click over here to stills. The skyline is really super wide. It's a panorama. It's 8,000 by 2,800. When I drop it into this sequence, which is the 1920 by 1080 default sequence, it's going to give me, by default, the edges that I want. It's not going to hide anything, but if I wanted to, I could click on this, go back here under the video tab, and instead of fit, I could say fill, and I see the whole thing. And if I want, I could move it left and right as needed. And I'll show you how you can do a pan on this, which is great when you get something larger, but see the Y. Remember, left and right is Y. Left and right is X, up and down is Y. Okay, I could reframe this the way I want. If I went back down here and instead of fill, did it as the original aspect ratio of 8,000 by 2,800, that's none. I'm in a situation where I'm really tight, but this is really sharp because the original image is that high resolution. And again, I could animate this, and I will actually show you quickly how to do it. It's not the thrust of this class, but it's a good thing to know, especially when you're dealing with different shapes and whatnot. So here, this image running in the rain, if we look at that, it's, again, widescreen, but not as wide, but it's the same thing. I could go in, and if I just say, I just need the basic image, I'm going to go down and hit fill, and that fills the whole thing. If I hit fit, you'd have the black and white, and then, of course, none would zoom in. Now, all of these I could do with my transform tool. And usually if I do that, I like to just hit none, so I know the full resolution. And then I may go back and I can scale this down with the transform tool. So first thing I want to do is scale it smaller, right till I see the edges. And now I can, again, move left and right. So I have full tactile control if I want. So maybe I don't want to start it. I want to start it a little tighter, and I want to frame it up like this. So I'm going to click here. This is the guy walking, and that's my first frame. And just to show you about keyframing, which we cover in other sessions, is I can position the clip exactly how I want it. And I would go over here, turn on my transform tool, or Shift T. Okay. Once I've done that, I can go and click on this little keyframe, and it's going to lock the video in that position, that X, Y, and scale position at this point in the timeline. And then I can move down the timeline, and all I need to do at this point is reposition my video, maybe zooming in a little bit more. I'll scale it to 100, okay? And it creates a new set of keyframes. You can see it here on the right. And so when I hit play with just a still image, and I can do this also with video, it's going to do a slow push and a move. And I can quickly modify that if I want. Here's the trick. I right-click on the clip in the timeline, and I say, show me my video animation. And you'll see the little dots here of where it starts and where it stops. If I wanted that to be slower, I could just spread that out. And now the zoom and push is a little more gradual. So that's the nice thing about being able to do all of this control once you decide on the size of your image. So if I had dropped this into my square one, let's go back to our projects. Actually, I probably have the square queued up here. Okay, there's my square image. Just going to throw that same video in at the end. So once again, it comes in by default. If I wanted to, I could go down here and say, and maybe what I want to do is just a pan, nothing fancy. I could do fill. I go back here to the beginning. It's still square, but I can see outside the square. I reposition this either by dragging, okay, if I'm good, but remember my Y's tend to get a little bit messed up, 0. And now I would again want to be able to create a keyframe. So it's Shift T. You'll see it here. Then I'm going to go back and go to the end of my sequence. There we go. And all I want to do is move the y-axis, make sure it's selected. And there we go, X. And I have now, in my square, taken advantage of an odd size image and done an animation. So a lot of times what you may want to do if you know you're going to deliver square and you want to do a lot of complicated moves or pushes or have full control, you may want to be able to work in an environment where you see your square space. And remember, I'm seeing outside the frame. With this button, I'm seeing what's inside the frame. And when I export this as a square image, they'll see exactly what I want them to see, the viewer will see. But a lot of times you may have a hodgepodge of images and you want to let the AI, the artificial intelligence within Final Cut, to help you along. And there's a couple of ways to attack this. I'm going to show you a basic one. Let me go back here to my projects. And I have a full cut here. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that just so I have a backup. And I'll open up the duplicate. So let's say I have this here and I put, and I have an image that's the wrong size that comes in. So let's say I'm going to actually delete a bunch of this stuff so it's not as complicated. Shift Z lets me see the whole timeline. I'm going to kill any audio that just so you don't have to hear the audio. Okay, so I have this image. She's dancing, dancing, dancing. And all of a sudden, she's talking about cats. And I grab one of these cat images. You're like, why am I grabbing a cat image? Because they're vertical. See if we can get a different vertical image. So here we have, so this is a square image, just the cat. We'll throw it in. I'm going to wedge it in. I'm going to do an insert edit. So it's the W key. Throws it in. Ah, it's an HD. So this is, again, another problem. I'm going to throw this into my timeline. And oh my gosh, how many times have you shot something with your phone in high dynamic range and you put it in, you go like, okay, this looks like junk, but it looked really good over here. Well, Final Cut can work with images that are both this extended high dynamic range as well as standard. And most people's phones and TVs, it's always safe to put everything into a what we call a Rec 709 or a standard dynamic range timeline. But when you put a high dynamic range clip in, it looks like that. So here's the trick and here's the solution. You want to go over to your effects tab. Okay, not your effects preset. You want to go over here. There we go, effects, there we go. And you're going to pick a toning effect that will fix this. And I am right now blanking, but it will come to me in just a moment. I think it might be either under color, but I'm going to just type in to see if I can remember this. Which we'll try. I think it's under tone. This is when you come back to back, HDR. Oh, that's tone HDR. HDR tools. So I take this and I drop that onto this cat clip. So again, if you shot something on your phone in high dynamic range and you bring it into your show and it looks horrible, drop this filter on that clip and it will quickly start adjusting for this. So it's taking it down. It's better. It still's not perfect. Okay. And I want to do, let's see how this was shot. There we go. Different options. There we go. HLG to 709. And now it looks a lot closer. And if I needed to tweak it, I could then add some color corrections, but it's a lot closer. The other thing you will have noticed is that when I brought this into my timeline, there's nothing more distracting. I love that audio of a cat. But now I wanted to scale this up. And instead of going to the fill and fit, I can select a clip and under modify, I can go to something called Smart Conform. And I'll click on that. And what Final Cut will do, it will do its best guess to scale it and position it. If this was a human, it would try to pick the best part of the image. It did as best as it could here. And then I might need to assist it a little bit. I would go back here under my transform and then move it down a little bit, and I'm good to go. So that's the thing about this Smart Conform. And I want to show you this in a little more detail. Let's say that I took this project and I go over here and I'm going to duplicate my full cut. And I'm going to select this, and under modify, I'm going to change it to a custom layout. I'm going to change it to square. Okay, so I'm going to go here and say square, 1080 by 1080. I hit OK. Okay, that's full cut 2. I open that up, and look what it did. It tried to scale everything above and below, and this is nice, but now I'm going to have to go through and manually figure on how to scale it up, or in some cases when she's dancing, figure out and tracking her, like I had some work here. Well, I can use that same modify command by right-clicking on any of these to select it, modify, smart conform, and then it should automatically, it scaled up the background clip. That was what was selected. And it tried to center her. It's using AI to find faces or dominant motion. The cat was a little confusing. And then I have maybe this jump right here. I can go again here and go modify, smart conform. And in this case, it's trying to center the dancing. Does a pretty good job. But again, I could tweak it and say, the mirror kind of threw you off. Let's bring it over here. And we could go through so everything is now fitting. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this clip. You can see there's square and square. So that's a very manual way of doing it. It's one way of working. But generally, what you're going to do is you may have a sequence and you throw a clip in. And if it's the one clip that's vertical in a horizontal sequence, or horizontal and vertical, you may just want to go to smart conform for that one clip and let Final Cut do its best analysis and guess. And as I said, about 95% of the time, it's spot on. But sometimes you have a cat or you have somebody dancing in a mirror, and it's like, which is the primary area of focus, and you need to help it a little bit. But here's where the magic really happens. Okay, I have my full cut, original full cut. And if I open that up, you play it through, there's lots of stuff happening, a complex timeline. But I built it as a wide angle, and now I want it to be square when I deliver it. And I want it to be smart square, which means if something's on the edge of the frame, I want to make sure that it's in the middle of the square and not off screen. So what I need to do, I'm going to take this full cut, and this is really cool. I'm going to right click on it to duplicate it. But there's a new option under Duplicate Project As. If I select Duplicate Project As, I'll get this dialog box, which is like creating a new project. And here, if I keep it the same aspect ratio, this button here, Smart Conform, grayed out. Don't need to conform. I'm going from 16 by 9 to 16 by 9. But let's say I go to square or create a custom 4 by 5. We'll stick with square now, go to 1080 by 1080. Now I can click the Smart Conform button. And what Final Cut will do, it will analyze all of the clips individually. It's not going to just crop it off to the side and do its best guess of reframing these clips into that square format. Now, there's a couple of things that will break it that you'll see you have to manually fix. If you've done a move on a clip, it will say, I'm not sure exactly what your intent is. It literally doesn't say that, but that's about what it's thinking. And it will show you that clip just in a fit mode where you just see it completely inside, and you're going to have to re-animate that clip using the transform tool. So there are situations where it says, no, I'm not designed to do this. We need human intervention, and it will give you a warning often when it does that. But the beautiful thing is, normally all I'd have to do is make this 1080 by 1080. I can also do it vertical. I'll show you that in a moment. I hit OK. I'm going to change this from 10 full cut to 10 full cut square. And I'm going to hit OK. It's going to analyze this. It's looking at all those clips and saying, OK, where can I reframe them? And you'll see a couple points where it doesn't do a good job. But as I said, 95% of the work is going to be done for me. So I'm now creating a brand new sequence with all of these clips. It's square, okay? So there it is, 10 full cut square. And if I scrub through this, and you can see it's done a pretty good job of centering what I want. There's a couple of points where it couldn't do well. One is this title, okay? So it just cropped it at this point. So in this case, if I wanted to use this title sequence, I would click on this and then I would manually adjust it, which isn't that hard. But I do want to point out that if you look underneath your title and generators tab, I'll click on that, it's the upper left-hand corner, and scroll down, and I have a lot of third-party ones here, but let's see where I'm looking at. Where is it? It should be here, which is going to be, so there we go, social. I just have a lot of extra stuff here. Anything title that you make using items from the social subcategory will automatically reposition when you do that smart conform, and you don't have to manually move it over. It was designed in motion to understand, because these were designed with these new features, and it will automatically, if I did 16 by 9, it would make sure it still's in the frame. I don't manually have to do it. So remember, if you want, go in and you're creating titles and you know you're going to put it out at different aspect ratios, build your titles off of the ones under social. And when you smart conform, those titles will be positioned as you expect them to be positioned. So a couple of other areas. This was a zoom in the original one. And in this case, it did not do a smart conform because it really doesn't know what I wanted. So again, this is where I may manually come in and change things. I may go back to that and go to my transform and just reset that parameter. And in this case, it's actually pretty good, but I could hit smart conform again if she was moving. And at this point, it's going to analyze that clip for the primary action on a person's face, and position it. But for the most part, if I scrub through this, and again, I want to mute all my audio. I'm going to do this a quick way. Again, this is something that's a little more advanced. If you haven't used Final Cut, I can go in here under my roles and just turn off all of my music and dialogue so it doesn't bother you. And if I play this through or scrub it, see, it did okay with this title, but it's positioned, and look, here it's tracking her. And now I have something that's perfectly square. And if it misses, like this one, she might dance out of frame. I may go in and just tweak that one a little bit, but a lot of the work has been done for me. Again, lovely slow motion stuff there. Okay, this was again where I had some weird framing. Okay, so I can go back, and if I wanted to, I could just reset that transform, select the clip, and I'm going to go modify, smart conform. And did you see what it just did? When I did smart conform, it knew that she was too close to the edge and it wasn't proper framing, and it actually repositioned her. And this is actually what it's doing behind the scenes when I reconform my entire sequence. Okay, so I can go through and manually fix things, but I'll tell you, Shift Z to see the entire sequence, it really got me exactly where I want it to be. And you know, there might be one or two little changes that I want to go through as I scrub and say, okay, let's center that or zoom that in, and we're good to go. And now I can simply share that, hit export that, and I'm going to export that to say a Apple device or a 4K. When I do that, if you look at the settings, it's square and it is all positioned, and I'm good to go. I'm going to hit cancel now. And by the way, you can export this smaller, but as I indicated at the beginning of the session, you want to upload to whatever social media account you have at the highest resolution it is willing to accept, which is usually either 1920 by 1080 or a variation of ultra high definition of the 4K. I'm going to hit cancel for now because we don't want to export that. But I could go back here and maybe I could do this one of two ways. I could go back to my projects, and here we have the 1080 by 1080 square. This is creating so many. Here we go, full cut 1080 by 1080 is what I called it. There we go, 1080 full cut square. I could take this and duplicate it and make it vertical. I could also have done this with the original widescreen. Now, some of these shots really will not be conducive to 16 by 9 or 9 by 16. but I want to just show you how it works. I'm going to make this vertical. Again, let's keep it at the standard resolution, 1080 by 1920, which is 9 by 16. I'm going to hit Smart Conform, hit OK. We're going to change this from square to vertical, just so I know what it is. Hit OK. It will reanalyze this, and you'll see it'll be vertical now. And again, I may have to tweak it a little bit if there's something odd, especially with that first animation. But I can do this, and my recommended workflow is build something 16 by 9. Don't try to do a lot of moves if you know you're going to send it out with various aspect ratios, vertical, horizontal, square, and do those moves to the individual clips after the fact. But you can see I saw the problem. I was able to fix it by resetting the transform parameter, then doing a smart conform to that clip and tweaking it if necessary. So here's the vertical. Let's click on it and see how it did. See, we lost that name here because it wasn't from the that one section of my titles and graphics. So again, I would go here, just move it over, but she's centered pretty well. We have the feet centered pretty well. This is an odd shot. There was really almost no way for Final Cut to figure out what the best thing is. And this is where I might go in and say, you know what, I want to see what's around, and maybe this is going to be my best solution. So it did its best guess, but you know, it's feet and a ballerina. And here we go. This one was centered. It's bigger than it was. If I had used, again, one from the social section of my titles, it would actually scale properly. But this works for me. It's a quick fix. And I can go through and just see, you know, it's done a pretty good job. And in some cases, you know, she's starting there and jumping out of frame. I can, again, select that. I can go over here just to adjust my position. Again, we had a mirror that was confusing us. Quick fix. We're good to put it out. I would scroll through. This is a lot easier than going clip by clip and doing this. And as I said, if it's 95%, like this clip here is a situation, again, I just want to move it over because I want to see your hands. A lot easier than doing this one by one. And you want to keep in mind when you're creating or editing your show, you know, that you may be doing this, so you kind of pre-plan. But even if you haven't pre-planned, it does an amazing job of succeeding at doing what you want. In this case, it's a little bigger because it doesn't scale. I didn't pick the right one. I can simply go up here under my transform, scale it down just a little bit, and we're good. I may need to widen that out because I lost a letter. So that's, in a nutshell, different ways you can export it. And then depending on the framing of the system, you know, you just go and do a normal export. It'll do square, it'll do vertical, it'll do whatever the aspect ratio is of that project when you export these. So I just want to quickly jump back into the keynote here, just to reiterate some things. So there's the smart conform option. You can change that to square. There's another thing I want to show you, which is, you know, the formats and frame rates and aspect ratio and duration of what different social media platforms will accept as their maximum, and in some cases their minimum, changes over time. You know, originally, if you tried to put in a 1920 by 1080 clip to, say, YouTube in the old days, it would say, no, that's too big. Now it'll take 4K or even higher. So this is a good reference. This is video specs for 2020, but there's a couple ones. Hootsuite has this one. I didn't update the complete guide to social media. Sprout Social will update and show you what the latest. As a matter of fact, when you open it up, it'll be like, this is as of August 2022. And it goes through and says, you know, what's TikTok? What's Vimeo? What's the maximum most beneficial for YouTube? So you can make sure you deliver the right or the highest quality and correct aspect ratio for those different social media platforms. And I think that's the crux of it. I had some little notes here, which I talked about. I'm not going to do it. It's like, these were the recommended ones. And actually, I grabbed this deck and it's a little bit outdated. But the important thing is, from a workflow point of view, is do it as large as possible. If you're going to do a lot of different formats, start with wide. landscape, and then you can always change it. If all your media is vertical, or if your final is going to be vertical, then you should build it that way. Always shoot at a higher resolution than you think you'll need, because it allows you to punch in and not lose any of your resolution. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you.